Welcome back to Key Point here on TV3. We're live on 3FM 92.7. Also live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, and all across the world on 3news.com. Our guest for this next and final conversation is an international law advisor to the Attorney General, or was an international law advisor to the Attorney General, Marietta Brewer-Piopong. Is a former national coordinator of the Maritime Boundary Secretariat and also an international law expert. So Kwame Mfojo is our guest for the morning. Mr. Kwame Mfojo, thank you so much for joining us on Key Point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okanse.
And this is what we call the New Ideas series, a conversation about doing different things and expecting different results instead of this path of doing the same things and deceiving ourselves that we would get different results. The last time we spoke, this was about a month ago on Zoom. It was about the Ghana's domestic debt exchange program and then also our engagement with the IMF. China being our single biggest external creditor, and our engagements with China so as to get the ears and attention of the IMF board for this program. What are some of the dynamics that underlines, for instance, such engagements, and why Ghana and indeed Ghanaians should be concerned about how things will play out?
Well, I guess I'll start off by saying hello to everybody out there and to TV3. Thank you very much for having me on again. I have to admit that I did not expect this question, but it's fine. I will respond to it very quickly, very succinctly, and then we get on to the matter. We get on to the matter of the day. But what you're doing here, I think, is illustrating the power of the journalist. You see how you sneaked up on me to get me to talk about China and our darling Ken.
And now, I know your expertise in there.
So let me just say very quickly that we sorted out what the domestic bondholders were going to contribute in terms of what haircuts they were prepared to take. Now, we needed to do that because there are a number of actors in this situation, the domestic people and the external people. The external people are of two types: the private sector people who have lent money to us because they want to make money. And then there's the bilateral creditors, or the government people, China, United States, Brazil, Malaysia. There's a whole long list of them, India, and so on, who have basically lent money to Ghana to help us out more actually than even necessarily making money. And then there are the multilateral creditors like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, right, who are also, because this money the IMF is going to give us, we're going to have to pay it back. It's not free. We're going to have to pay it back. And the way that this system works, we pay the IMF and the World Bank first before we pay anybody else, which allows me to come to China. China's position is very simply this, that there are a lot of people who have lent money to Ghana, including China itself, a lot of groups, okay? A lot of different groups, different countries. So they don't understand why suddenly the focus is on China. China is the one who has to do this. China has to give in, and so on and so forth. So part of what they have basically been doing is they are playing a bit tough from their point of view to say, look, if anybody is going to get a haircut, it's not just China. Even the IMF and the World Bank should also get a bit of a haircut. Now, if the IMF lends us $3 billion and China has only lent us $1.7 billion, quite frankly, the Chinese position is, why is it that it's only China who's going to have to make sacrifices? Do you see? When in fact, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank perhaps should also make some sacrifices.
Fantastic.
Does that help?
Indeed. And we'll see how things play out. And in fact, it's very interesting days ahead. We understand the engagements have begun already, but straight to the issues. And it's obviously it's in the interest of the nation. So there's some nexus in there between
Yes.
this topic and what we're going to talk about. But the president honored thousands of people for their service in various ways to this country within the week. This is a tradition that was started as far back as Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's regime and subsequently continued by others as well. And President Kufuor is following the step. A number of people rejected it on the basis of principle. And one of them is Fui Chikata. And there's a statement that he put out. And you understand why our guest is with us in studio and his relation to this statement. We'll put that statement on the screen shortly. He says, this is from Fui Chikata. I understand that my decision to decline the offer of a national award is being interpreted as motivated by partisan political considerations. In my letter of 2nd November 2022 to the Solicitor General in response to her informing me of the offer of the award, I explained that I have long and deeply held convictions about not accepting recognition in the form of national honors. Those who know me will confirm those convictions, and as well as my inclination to avoid grand public gestures and the fuss around them. If anything tarnishes the awards, it is not my rejection of the offer to me, but rather the unfortunate selective interpretation in deciding those involved in the maritime boundary litigation to whom awards would be given. It is impossible to understand the criteria which excluded the names of Nana Asafo-Adjei, Thomas Menu, Aya Ama, Kojo Agbeno Efunam, Nana Appiah-Chei, and Ni Adjei Akpo. Even Professor Martin Chamenyi is left out. It was his work that led to the creation of the Maritime Boundary Secretariat, which coordinated the litigation. He was influential and as a member of the team till he fell ill. Nor is it clear why Kwame Fojo, the man here, the coordinator of the Maritime Boundary Secretariat, and Nana Poko, the indefatigable cartographer of the team, were only deserving of certificates. That's in there. So this is Fui Chikata. But tell us, how for you, when this issue first came up and the role that you played as Secretariat and the concerns that Fui Chikata raises in this particular statement, Mr. Fojo?
Okay, let me, I guess a little bit of clarification is in order in terms of the sequencing of things. Now, I was actually in Nairobi. I came back to Ghana. I came back to Accra. I came back Thursday by 2 p.m. I was here. The awards had already been given
Indeed.
out. I was never told by anybody whilst I was in Nairobi that any awards were going to be given to anybody. So
Right.
you will hear during the ceremony that I'm not present. I had no idea, absolutely no idea that award things were happening. And Mr. H.K. Prempe, who is one of the awardees and is quite a good friend of mine, he actually sent me a text, are you coming, are you coming? And I said, well, what are you talking about? So there are all sorts of, let me just be nice and say, there are all sorts of problems with the way in which things were put together. And again, I'll try to be generous. Basically, what has happened is that the current team who put the awards list together, they did not consult with either me really as national coordinator, right, as to who really did what. They didn't consult. And as far as I'm aware, they may not even have consulted with Madame Gloria Kofo, and they certainly did not consult with Madame Marietta Brua-Piopong, so they have no idea of who really did what. That's part of where the problem has come from. And I'm trying to be generous here because this is national television and really one should not be, attacking specific people or anything like that. So there was a bit of a mock-up with the organization of who should get what. And then the whole process appears to have been driven from inside Jubilee House, which itself is something like 8 years behind the fact. Somebody in there doesn't have any idea of who anybody is. I understand people are looking for a phone number for me on 2 or 3 days before the event. I have an email. Nobody sent me an email saying, oh, can you come back to Ghana because this thing is happening. So the whole thing was extraordinarily badly organized. That is point number one. Point number two, precisely because the people who organized things were out of the loop, and here I'm going to be really quite specific, and unfortunately I'm going to have to name a name. There's Mrs. Sylvia Adusu, who works at the Attorney General's Department. She was part of the team up until 2015, and then she went off to go and do what turned out to be an excellent thesis on, these maritime boundary international law issues in the UK. She got an order of the Volta, but during the period of the actual case itself, she was not on the team. She was doing a PhD in London. Mr. Jogate, former Attorney General, he was not on the team from 2014 to 2017, even though as Attorney General, he had some connection with things going back. But if that's the case, then Betty Mould should get an award. Martin Amidu should get an award. Mr. Ikweyo too should get an award. Do you see? Because all these ministers had something to do with this thing, which has been going on for some time.
For the period they traveled.
Precisely. And then Ghana Boundary Commission ministers who are ministers for lands and natural resources. Not a single one of them is mentioned. Mr. Enusa Fuseini, not mentioned. Professor Vanion Yakubu, Chief Director at the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, who played this huge role in this thing, not mentioned. Mr. Neil Samuels, not mentioned. Mr. Collins Dowda, not mentioned. Then Foreign Affairs, the late Alaji, I may be wrong on this, Alaji Mumuni, not mentioned. Hannah Tete, not mentioned. Do you see? So the whole thing is not good. Let's just be really simple and frank about it. So it is on that basis, even just looking at the people who actually led the process. And I should also point out that one of our key agents, the way the system works, is the ambassadors in Germany. So Nana Sena Kwadanso, if I've got her name properly, she was our agent or co-agent in Germany at the time. And then the wife of because unfortunately, she's independent in her own right. Gina Blake, a very, very good personal friend of mine, and the wife of Freddie Blake. She was the ambassador in Germany. She's part of this process, and the communications, the way it works actually is that the communication goes first of all to our diplomatic agent in Germany. There's all these people who are completely ignored. Now, this organogram, I don't know whether we're going to be able to
we'll expand it.
So let me just say that the total number of people who the Maritime Boundary Secretariat managed for this process is actually 76 people. 76 people, okay? Right? And this includes all the staff, the junior staff, the drivers, the translators, the people who actually did the real work behind the scenes. Yes. Now, so what we have in this chart, I hope that people can actually read it.
Yes.
But this is an organogram which I had to draw up at some point when I was providing the final report for the project. And you will see that on the left-hand side in the big column, yes.
I see the leadership.
These are the people.
Attorney General and agents of Ghana.
Yes,
supported
precisely.
by co-agents, and that's what you see on the screen.
Yes.
Minister of Petroleum, Chair, Ghana Boundary Commission, Ambassador of Ghana to Germany,
yes.
And then Solicitor General, Republic of Ghana.
And then there's the externals. Let me just make a really important point about the externals. The externals deserve a huge award. And the reason that the externals are not awarded is because if you awarded the externals would actually be coming to see the people whom they know, who they did the work with.
Right.
So part of the reason, a very key reason why the externals were not awarded is that if they had been awarded, the scam that happened would have been exposed. Do you see? Because
see.
Philippe and others dealt with everybody whom they met 6 times.
So they
in
could
Ghana.
really
They know
identify
the people. So they
the
would
people.
have, so they would have met Professor Dr. Dominic Phoebe and said, "Oh, excuse me, do we know you? Do you see?" So, But anyway, let me just get back very quickly through the list. So, external team of 14, based from all over the world. That's a legal group. And then the technical team, which is basically 2 companies, Mabdi and then International Mapping. Now, these two technical people are the leading mapping people in the world in this area. And this is where Nana Poku, who Fui actually mentions, comes in. Nana Poku worked with these people at the same level of expertise, worldwide, global expertise. I went through the materials because I have all the materials for the case in my computer, and in something like, I don't know, maybe 70 boxes. We presented 20,000 documents.
20,000
documents to the court.
To make a strong case
Precisely.
for Ghana to
and
win
even
this.
The people who managed this, Ellie, others, no mention at all. But anyway, let's get back to this thing. So 14-person external, the lawyers up there, Philippe, Paul Reichler, and so on. I mean, people who, I guess, have international prominence. We had a Francophone area lawyer supporting us as well. Then we come to the Ghana team. The Ghana team itself, in its core essence, was 54 people, including the Maritime Boundary Secretariat, and I was the coordinator for that. And the work that we did is right at the bottom there. But the Ghana legal and technical team is split into 2 groups. 17 people in the legal team, the total legal team, and then 25 people in the technical team. Now the technical team was split into 2. The petroleum sector technical team, who were not mentioned at all. There's the older people, Nia J. Akpo, then Nana Boachia Safwe Charles Menu, Thomas Menu, and then Theo Ashray.
Thomas Menu was the director of GMPC Exploration at the time.
Deputy Chief Executive, then Mr. Nto Amwa, Mr. Sam Topping, Dr. Senso. These are the economics people. Again, absolutely no mention. Now, the non-petroleum sector technical team did get a mention. There was a lot of mention of Mr. Mohenu and so on. You saw them coming up.
Right.
Now, they actually did really fantastic work in the lead up when we're negotiating. And part of the reason that these problems have occurred is if one is to be frank, is because there were people doing the negotiations, geologists, geophysicists, technical people. And then because we were going to go to court, the lawyers took over. And you know the problem that we lawyers have. We take over the thing and,
make you look like you did everything.
So when the story came to be told, after the NDC had left power, let us be honest and just say that some of the geophysicists and the technical people now told a story in which the lawyers were actually
relegated,
sidelined. So it's not an NDC versus NPP issue at all. It is old team versus new team. But old team got to tell the story, and old team awarded a lot of things to themselves. Do you see?
Right.
This is it. And when Fui and Marietta saw that old team had left out the people who came later, who are now here, they decided that they wanted not to have anything to do with
because it was not a
process.
clear and honest representation.
Precisely. It was not a clear and honest representation of what actually happened. And so when you actually look, as far as the leadership of the technical team is concerned, it was Thomas Menu and Nana Boachia Safwe, Theo Ashray, all petroleum people, and then Nia J. Akpo. And these people are old style people from, they set up the petroleum department in the end of 1960s, getting to the 1970s. And what is important here is that without the assistance of Mr. Piache, who I understand probably still works for Tallow, and Anabuachi Asafweje, we would not have been able to prosecute this case at all. Why? Because GNPC had lost all the records. The records were marked up, they were mishmashed. Some of them were lying under some place somewhere next to the sea. So the maps that we took to the court came from Nana Boakye Asafo-Adjei and Mr. Apiache.
Nana Boakye Asafo-Adjei was a consultant at that time.
Yes, precisely. I had left GMPC, but these were their personal maps. Their personal maps from their personal files. If we had not had the good luck that these people, because they are geologists, they file their maps the way that lawyers file their files. So we got every single map from Nana Boakye Asafo-Adjei and from Mr. Apiache.
Wow.
We did not get them from GMPC records because they were all destroyed. They were destroyed, right?
They were destroyed.
Yes, remember the drill ship
Yes.
and Mr. Katie Hammond and some documents?
Indeed.
Yes. And I have all sorts of pictures which I decided not to show here because, I mean, people are weeping about Ghana, and people would actually scream even louder, hey, how could this happen? So without Nana Boakye Asafo-Adjei, who is not mentioned, Mr. Apiache, who is not mentioned, Neaje Akpo, who is not mentioned. And actually, let me just do the petroleum people, because there were younger petroleum people as well, probably a group of about 7 or 8, who were actually critical in getting us to win this case, because at the end, what Philippe, our lawyer, decided to do was to go through every single concession that had been awarded by Ghana since up until yes.
Every
single concession, we presented its history to the court. And you know how that was possible? Because the old guys were there and the young guys were there, and they spent about 6 hours with Philippe preparing every single concession. And so Philippe went through 1, 2, 1, 2. And then he would say to the court, do you see Cote d'Ivoire here? He would speak in English, he would speak in French, because we had bilinguality also on our side. All this had to be recognized, and it was not recognized. So you can see I'm a bit agitated.
Yes.
But you can understand why Marietta.
And that's understood.
Yeah, you can understand why Marietta, who supervised this process for something like 4 years, right? Day and night. And I mean, in terms of how we actually worked, every single morning, I would talk to Marietta about 6 a.m. and she would say, okay, this is what's happening. I want you to draft this. I want you to see me by 8:30. We need to move because the Ivorians are doing their thing in Flagstaff House. Wow. All these issues meant that we were working day and night on these matters, and none of it is reflected in the awards. So I've had people phone me from right across the world and ask, what's happening? So I'm a bit agitated.
And it is actually in the right state. And that's one of the reasons why, the most important reason why we brought you in here, to also let the world know the role that many others, including yourself, played in this. And we want to congratulate you on behalf of the Ghanaian people.
Thank you.
For this. And he is a former national coordinator of the Maritime Boundary Secretariat, an international law advisor to the former international law advisor to Attorney General, Minister of Justice Marietta Buapiopong at the time. They all played critical roles in this ITLOS ruling, which Ghana won, for that matter. Thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr.
And that's our guest for the New Ideas series, talking about national honors, Mr. Kojo Mfojo. Kwame Mfojo. On behalf of the team, thank you so much for staying with us here on Key Point. And then also on behalf of the Nelson Ross Dafiamepo, also to you, Ms. Obeniwa Jesse of Bantama NDC, says wants to extend greetings to you. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Key Point. Join us same time next week. I am Alfred Okanse. Have a great weekend.